It was October 31st, Halloween at this time. My parents were still together and hadn't divorced yet, so my siblings and I stayed together, but my family had a rule where half of us went with my mother and the other half went with my father. I have 5 siblings, but my little sister wasn't born yet, so it was just the 4 of us. My sister, who was around 3 years younger than me, and I went with my dad, while my little brother and sister went with my mom. My dad planned to take us trick-or-treating in a different area that had bigger houses. I called a few friends to see if anyone wanted to join us. Now, most of them couldn't come, but one friend, Aubrey, said she could make it, so my dad picked up Aubrey from her house, and we drove to a big neighborhood full of beautiful houses. The streets were lined with decorated homes. Aubrey and I wandered off while my dad stayed with my sister. I was full of energy and sometimes ran ahead, leaving my friend behind, because I wanted to get more candy and visit every house before Halloween ended. Halfway through trick-or-treating, Aubrey and I walked so far that there were no more kids around us. We were chatting about school, some drama with friends, and what we planned to do with all the candy we'd collected, just random stuff like that. About 7 minutes later, we heard the strange scraping sound, like something being dragged on the ground. It was loud enough to catch our attention. We turned around and saw a person in a creepy clown costume holding a bat slowly walking towards us. We were in the middle of the street, and even though we weren't sure what was going on, we started to feel uneasy. I've always been afraid of clowns, so I quickly picked up my pace and Aubrey followed right behind me. The street was really quiet, and we realized we were pretty far from other kids, which made it even more unsettling. We kept looking back to see the clown. After about 30 seconds, the clown stopped walking and just stood there facing us. We told each other we should go find my dad, and then we glanced back at the clown one more time, and suddenly he started running towards us at full speed. We took off running, screaming, and not even paying attention to where we were going. It was a steep and quiet road similar to the back roads near my old apartments, with hardly anyone around. The clown was screaming as he chased us. I didn't dare look back, but later Aubrey told me the clown had his bat raised like he was going to hit us. Our hearts were racing as we turned a corner that led to a street we recognized. We ran across the street, barely paying attention to the traffic. When we reached the other side, it suddenly became silent. The screaming stopped, and we realized we couldn't hear the clown anymore. He was gone. The clown was no longer behind us. After running for a while, we finally found my dad and told him everything. He believed us because we were crying and screaming, and also because we were just 13 years old. The look of fear on our faces made it clear that something was wrong. Now my worst fear is clowns, and it will always be that way, Aubrey, and I will never forget that moment, and we still talk about it from time to time. It really traumatized me. Looking back, the clown might have just been a silly teenager in a costume, trying to scare little kids. What a creep. When I was 9 years old, Halloween was the best night of the year. My friend Jack and I looked forward to it for weeks that year. Like every year, we dressed up, grabbed our pillowcases, and went out to collect candy from the neighbors. The streets were full of kids dressed as monsters, superheroes, and ghosts. The air was cool, the sky was dark, and the only light came from street lamps and the glowing jack-o'-lanterns sitting on porches. Jack and I had a plan. We would hit every house in our neighborhood before it got too late. At first, everything felt normal, like any other Halloween. People smiled at us, dropped candy into our bags, and told us to have fun. But as we walked farther from home, the streets got quieter, fewer kids were out, and the houses became more spread out. It was after dark when we noticed him. He stood at the end of the street near an old house that no one had lived in for years. The man was tall, wearing dark clothes, and just stood there watching us. At first, we didn't think much of it. Maybe he was a parent waiting for his kids. But as we kept walking, we realized he was still there, still watching us. His face was hard to see, hidden in the shadows. We whispered to each other about him, but tried to ignore it and keep going. Our bags were getting heavy with candy, and I was ready to head home. Soon we were on a stretch of road where there weren't many houses, just a few trees and empty lots. That's when I noticed something strange. The man was walking too slowly, but he was definitely following us. Jack noticed it too, and his face tightened. He glanced back over his shoulder more and more often. Let's just keep going, I said, trying to act like it didn't bother me, but inside I felt uneasy. There was no reason for him to be following us like that. After a few more minutes, the man did something even stranger. He started calling out to us. His voice was rough, low, and hard to hear at first, but as we kept walking it became clearer. Hey, kids, you want more candy? His voice echoed down the empty road. We stopped walking and I turned around to look at him. In his hand he held up a large plastic bag stuffed full of candy. I felt a weird mix of excitement and confusion. More candy, that sounded great, but something about it felt wrong. Why would a grown man be standing alone in the dark, offering candy to random kids I didn't know? But the thought of more candy made me curious. I think we should go over, I said to Jack, but he shook his head, his face pale. He grabbed my arm, holding me back. No, we need to leave, he said. That guy's not right. I think he wants to take us. I didn't want to believe him. Jack was always more careful than me, always worrying about things that didn't seem like a big deal, but this time I could see real fear in his eyes. Something about the way the man stood there staring was off. I started to doubt myself. We stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. The man took a step closer. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, too forced, like he was pretending to be nice. He waved the bag again. Come on, he said, it's Halloween. I've got plenty of candy for you. That was when I knew Jack was right. This wasn't normal. Something was wrong with this man. We needed to get out of there and fast. Run, Jack whispered. We didn't waste any more time. We turned and sprinted down the street, our bags of candy banging against our legs. The man's footsteps started behind us, heavy and fast. He was chasing us. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear the man getting closer, his breath loud in the quiet night. I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I could think about was getting home and getting to safety. Our house was only a few streets away, but it felt like miles. My legs burned as I pushed myself to run faster. Jack was right beside me, not saying a word, just running with everything he had. We reached our street, but the man was still behind us, closer than ever. I could hear the thud of his boots on the pavement, and it made me feel like he was right at my back. We cut across a neighbor's yard, jumping over their bushes, and ran up to my house. I fumbled with the door handle, my hands shaking, but finally got it open. Jack and I threw ourselves inside, slamming the door behind us. We stood there in the hallway, breathing hard, listening. For a few seconds there was nothing but silence. Then we heard footsteps outside, slow and heavy. They stopped right in front of our door. My heart raced as I held my breath, waiting. The man was right there, just outside, but he didn't try to come in. After a moment the footsteps started again, moving away. We peeked through the window, watching as he disappeared into the night. He didn't look back. He just walked off like nothing had happened. We didn't tell anyone about what happened. I don't know why. Maybe we thought no one would believe us, or maybe we just wanted to forget it. But I never forgot the way that man had stared at us, followed us, and chased us. Even now, every Halloween I think about him, wondering who he was and what he really wanted. Jack and I never talked about it again, but I think he remembers too. It's the kind of thing you don't forget, no matter how hard you try. I'm a female, and this is something that happened several years ago when I was in college. It takes place on Halloween night, and I was at a new university. I was a junior, but had recently transferred from a different college, and this was my first year there. Because of this, I lived in the dorms. I was able to make some friends at college pretty quickly at my new school, and by Halloween we had plans to hang out. There was a few Halloween parties going on at some friends' houses and things like that. I dressed up as a cowgirl and walked with my friend to another friend's house. They were having a costume party. This lasted until maybe 10 or 11 at night, and then the people left to go to some bars nearby. I went with some of my friends, but the story really starts when I left the bar. Obviously, with it being Halloween, just about everybody had a costume on of some sort. It was sometimes hard to tell who everybody was. Eventually, though, at one of the bars we were at, I got tired and wasn't feeling it anymore. I decided to go back and go to bed, but none of my friends wanted to leave yet. It was maybe a little past 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't think it was a big deal that they didn't want to go and I would go back by myself. The walk back to my dorm would only take like 10 minutes, and it wasn't that cold out or anything. I left the bar and started heading back. There were a few people out on the sidewalk at first, but it got much quieter. I headed down one of the sidewalks back towards campus. That was only a couple of blocks. When I was almost at campus is when I saw the guy walking a ways back on the sidewalk behind me. He was dressed up as the Joker from Batman, but he was wearing a rubber mask instead of painting his face. I had remembered seeing him at one point in the bars. I didn't know who he was, but I figured that it was maybe another student. The guy was maybe 100 foot behind me as I walked home. He did the same route as me and remained behind me. I stopped paying attention to him though. But when I was back at campus and approaching my dorm, I noticed him again. This was a little bit odd, but he possibly lived in my dorm building. I remember I kept seeing him a ways back, just walking closer to me. He also appeared to be looking at me the entire time, but through the mask, I couldn't really tell. Eventually, I made it to my building and got inside. When I was in, I went to the elevator and up to my floor, which was the 3rd floor. Then I walked to my room and got inside. I changed and I was about to go to the bathrooms down the hallway. When I did, I heard somebody was going to walk past my room from outside. Instead of just walking out of my room, I looked through my peephole to see who was there. I saw the guy dressed up as the Joker walking by. I thought this was kind of strange. He then stopped at my door, which was really weird. That's when I wondered to myself if he had followed me back. Still, maybe he just lived there. My floor was all female, so I knew he didn't live on this floor. He was standing around for a few seconds, and then he kind of started pacing a little bit. He didn't really go out of my view though. Then at one point he removed his Joker mask. This revealed that he was probably not a college student. The guy looked to be in his 40s or maybe even 50s. He was short and heavy set. I had no clue what he was doing here. Then he put his mask back on. I went up to my door and tried opening it. Luckily, the door was locked. He stood there right on the other side of the door. For me, it was terrifying. Then I heard somebody's door opening from down the hallway. The guy then turned and walked away to the left. When he was out of my sight for a while, I opened up my door and looked out into the hallway. I couldn't see him, and he must have left the floor. I went to bed a short time after that, and I don't believe the man ever returned, but it was really creepy to know that he likely followed me all the way from a bar into my dorm.